Right. Uh, I hope you can see the screen. Um, so, right. So, I won't go into a long introduction, but what my talk is based on is to look at what are the implications of moving from the documentary cultures to digital cultures, and what are the implications for countries of the South or formerly colonized countries, uh, uh, but with particular reference to my part of the world, which is South Asia. And I take a larger, long durée kind of view on this and try and look forward, think ahead as to what are the implications of some of the choices, technological choices that we make today. Now, if we look at documentary cultures, we are aware that given the very nature of print, which is which requires a large capital input, and then typefaces had to be sort of solidified, it led to creation of a certain kind of linguistic nationalism. Within the oral universe, pre-print, languages were more malleable, and they would sort of change over a few hundred miles or so. But they sort of get solidified because it's linked to a particular script and to a particular print hub, necessarily a big town within a large geography. And this leads to linguistic nationalisms. But print had a more organic growth in Europe, but in India, it came in through colonialism. And there were print pioneers early on in various parts of India who got the first typefaces printed for their own for their languages. And typically, what would happen is that the dominant community within a particular region would get to take charge of what is the standard printed language, and that again created these regional identities. You can call it subnationalism, whatever you want to call it. So uh, and what I'm going to talk about a little bit is what are the implications of documentary cultures and coming with the coming of colonialism in my part of the world, and I'm sure it is true in experience of colonialism elsewhere as well. One of the things that happened is because of this clear distinction between languages through the typeface that is used for its expression, you had a situation where the British government sort of imposed linguistic categories through the census and other sort of administrative mechanisms, and it undermined linguistic diversity. Even today, under the Indian Constitution, there are 22 recognized languages, right? Official languages, right? It does not mean that they are all the languages. There's certain, like, there are many other languages, scores of other languages in India which are not recognized in the Constitution as official languages. But even then, it is so diverse. So actually, it was far more diverse, and colonialism did undermine the linguistic diversity, as it did elsewhere in the world. But India being a large country, it sort of shows up on a bigger scale. And now the one of the things that I want to bring in is that with the digital, one is able to sort of answer back to this problem of print, right? I mean, in a sense, in print, you have one keyboard and you have to type everything out through that keyboard. Whereas with the digital, it is possible to have multiple keyboards, and every particular language community, it just has to be able to code, and it can create its own keyboard. And if it has Unicode, it will work. Unicode is also always in development, and those kind of technologies are there. So just returning back to colonialism, what happens is that you know, colonialism brings in this documentary culture. Everything needs to be documented so that a colonial government is able to exert more control over its administered territories. So they try to create various surveys, survey institutions, archaeological survey, geological survey, botanical survey, to gather the information about the landscape which they are seeking to administer. And as a result, documentation by itself sort of creates categorizations. You have to put it down within a certain category, label it. And we've talked a little bit about the difficulties of taxonomy and diversity, but this was also a real case at that point of time, but it was not happening through any kind of democratic discussion. It was happening through administrative fiat. And that created sort of divisions. So, for example, land records in India, in some of the many of the communities, land would be owned by the community and not by specific individuals. But the British would, in order to know whom to tax, they need to find someone with a title deed. And as a result, a lot of, so I'm just giving you one example. For example, in Kerala, you have this dance form called Teyyam, which it's basically a shamanic dance performance form. And it was sustained by the Tarawad, which is the large sort of extended family. It was a matrilineal society. And whatever the lands, basically the Tarawad supported the temple. The temple was marker of the community, and the land and all its proceeds sort of went to the Tarawad, and the Tarawad then the temple, and it supported the Teyyam performances. But when colonialism came in, they were looking for individuals who would pay the taxes. And that broke down the structure of the matrilineal society. It became moved towards a patrilineal structure, the Tarawad, and so more nuclearization, and the Tarawad broke down. As a result, the land proceeds, revenues, and whatever, it dwindled. And Tayyam as a form sort of gets challenged. It sort of dwindles in its presence. So I'm giving you one example of how the sort of imposition of documentary cultures sort of plays havoc with life and culture in one particular instance, and this happens many times over. Another thing that happens, and this is something our part of the world is still dealing with, is basically there is one language which is Hindustani. Both the scripts, they say the same thing there. But this gentleman called Gilchrist, he created a situation where he chose the Persian or the Nastaliq script for the Muslims, and chose the Devanagari script for the Hindus. And that's how the schools were divided. That's how the textbooks were divided. That's how the languages got divided. That's how the community got divided. And we know what the result of that was, which is a partition and communal violence, which we are still dealing with in our part of the world. So I'm saying that the effects of colonialism have not gone over, have not been tackled. It's been 70, 80 years. It's not been tackled in many instances, right? So I'll just come back to this in a moment, but I show it in one more instance. I did some study of the top universities in India, top 15 universities, and I looked at their English literature syllabi or literature syllabi. English literature, as Gaurav Vishwanathan has shown, as a discipline sort of emerges in India as part of the preparation for the civil services, and so it's a discipline which is born through colonialism. Otherwise, right? And the way English literature was defined was basically literature which is written in England or in Britain. But over the last 40 years or so, there's been a certain kind of recanonization, questioning of the canon, bringing in other literatures in English written elsewhere, literatures in translation from India, the rest of Europe, etc. But if we look at the syllabi, we find that still that large blue chunk is still written, even today, all right? And we see that there is very little overlap by and large. So any curriculum has a core component and an elective component. All experimentation is only happening in the elective component, and very little is experimentation. So the core remains a very, very small, and the overlap areas is the smallest. That's in the middle, right? So you can see there's a huge number of authors. Sorry. How do I go back? Huge number of authors who are there in the electives and smaller in the core. But these electives are spread, always form the smaller part of the course, right? So they really don't have the emphasis. We can say that we teach so many other things, but it actually doesn't amount to much. So I'm arguing that the effects of colonialism have not yet been properly challenged. And now I'm saying, trying to say what will be the effect of the digital. Now, in India, we have a linguistic diversity. As I said, there's enormous number of languages. This is more than, so in the inner circle, you have the scheduled languages, but they can translate into so many other languages, which is out there, right? This is according to the 2011 census, the last time the census happened in the country, right? And one of the reasons why this linguistic diversity has got preserved in India is because in the 1960s and 70s, the Indian states, they were reorganized on linguistic lines. Earlier, they were following the British provincial divisions. But post-independence, there is a reorganization of states, particularly in the southern part of the country, on linguistic lines, right? Which led to certain amount of preservation of some of these languages. Otherwise, there is also another push of on the one side the use of Hindi, which is encouraged by the state, say that we should have a national language, and that should be followed by everybody. And that leads to a reaction against Hindi. So you have this anti-Hindi movement in various parts of the country. Sometimes there is intolerance in between languages also. But the other language that always prospers is English, which is the colonial language. And there is a huge economy, and which sort of pushes the English curriculum. So these are the two languages. Even though we have a linguistic diversity, these are the languages which are really the ones which are the power center. Question is, can the digital sort of question it and change it? One of the question, because we are in a DH conference, is that DH has several waves, right? The first is that of digitization. Then you go to digitalization, machine readable text, and then you go to the language models, etc., or any kind of NLP analysis, etc. Now, there has been certain amount of digitization in India with archival records, and if you want to train these language models, you need that base data. But there is very little digitalization. So whatever training of the language models that are taking place in India at all, if at all, they are taking place on poorly found sort of contemporary data. It is not based on a historical awareness of the language. There's no sense of tradition in the language models, that if these languages are actually trained on Indian language data, then they are going to be all trained in contemporary usage. And I would question the veracity of that, how effective that would really be. So So what we really need, and that is something I have been involved in developing, is reliable OCR, HTR solutions in Indian languages, which is a very important input right now. We are at that stage of digital scholarship. So I just and within the Indian languages also there's a big gap between high resource languages and low resource languages. For example, my mother tongue is Bangla. Now Bangla has an entire country to itself, although it is in some doldrums right now politically, but there has been a government to support the growth of NLP tools and other kind of things there. This is not true of most of the South Asian languages. And that's where one needs to invest, not necessarily only in time, but in academic energy as well. But we know that the Indian government right now is making a big push for AI-led strategies, right? So every aspect of, so it's like a tech solutionism that AI will solve all the problems. But AI, which my argument is that if AI is wrongly trained, A. Number two, in the absence of training, you are taking the data sets from the Euro-American data sets and bringing the tools directly in, right? And applying them. And what does it lead to? And it's also a lot of investment in AI and security. And this is not all publicly announced. This is something that surveillance is happening within. And what does it lead to? It leads to marginalization, further marginalization of people. So the argument that I am trying to make is that if you do not have properly trained digital tools, and if you bring in Euro-American tools as just plug and play into administration, into pedagogy, then you can pave way to a new form of kind of recolonialism. The way we saw that the imposition of documentary cultures on India sort of disrupted the life and culture and the social structures and sustainability in India. So one would say that governments and institutions have to invest in research for digital tools and empower low language resource language communities. The Indian government has been investing tremendously. There's a Bhashini project where they try to develop these tools for various Indian languages. CDAC is an institution which is developing a lot of tools. But you know what? Somehow in India, tools that are developed by the government are very private. They put it under very strict restrictions. You need a lot of permissions to be able to access those tools. You can't scrutinize them. And that should not be the way. So what I'm saying is that we need to escape that. There need to be this research, this development of tools need to be that which is based on sharing, on open licenses, so that we minimize the costs. Government should facilitate it, but not put the end result within a strict copyright license, that kind of thing. Many of the CDAC tools have atrophied. They have been developed 10 years ago. Had it been out in the open, developers would probably have worked on it because it's public money anyway. We need to be able to include multiple languages in the language of governance, and the machine learning model should be informed by local cultural knowledge, and it should be a people-driven movement. That's what I'm trying to say. So it's very important that the population as such, the future generation, knows how to handle digital technologies. And so one needs to empower that so that they not only are able to create the new tools, they're able to critique the new tools, which is very, very important. And beyond that, I mean, the South-South knowledge, and normally what happens, the communication between South and South is routed through the North, right? we should be able to develop tools where we can speak to each other across our languages without having to go through either the northern institutions or go through English. Even between Indian languages, translation happens through between one language to another through English. And I think that's a thing of the past. I mean, technologically, of documentary cultures. Anyway, these are some of the points that I want to make and be aware that if we do not develop these technologies, if we don't invest our time, energy, resources into this, there's a danger of recolonization.